Hey, welcome back to Rust Hoarder Garage. Where's my microphone? All right, we'll try it again. Hey, welcome back to Rust Hoarder Garage and the 1961 Rambler wagon rot box, which is really not a rot box anymore. If you didn't watch the video in the beginning where I dragged this car breaking into, check it out. You'll see why we call it the rot box. But now it's kind of the anti-rock box. But anyway, the next step on this build is to install power steering. This chassis is from a 79 Malibu G-body. They're all the same, and you'll hear me say Monte Carlo because originally I was going to put an 87 Monte SS chassis under this, but ended up with this one. But it's pretty much exactly the same. The only differences are a Monte Carlo SS has a 373 rear. This has a rear in it from Monte SS, so we have that. It has, I don't even know if it really has a bigger sway bar. This sway bar looks pretty big, and somebody may have swapped it over when they swapped the rear. But then the other big thing is power steering box. So this Malibu, even though it was a four-door, somebody was hot rodding it. They were doing things to it. It had a built transmission in it, and it had the Monte rear, and you know they were making improvements. But one thing they did do was they installed a manual steering box, which is fine for drag racing, and that was the go-to thing when you had a big block Nova or something, and you can say, I got manual steering and manual brakes, and I just don't want that anymore. I like power steering. So not only do I like power steering, I like quick ratio power steering. That's one reason I really like those Jaguar front suspensions that I use all the time, because they have really quick steering and a really good road feel, and I really like that. Well, one thing that the Monte Carlo SS did have was a good steering box. I don't know what the ratio is. I think it's like 12:7:1 or something, but it's only a few turns lock to lock. I don't remember exactly if it was 3 or 2.5. We'll double check, but regardless, I'm taking out this manual steering box, and I'll sell that to somebody who has an S10 and wants to go drag racing, and I'm going to install a Monte SS power steering box that I just happen to have on hand. This is the manual steering box I'm going to remove. Nothing special, really. Take off the pitman arm from the center link, 3 bolts, and it'll come right out. This is the box I'm going to install. This should be out of a Monte SS. Unfortunately, I had cleaned it up and forgot that there may have been a paint code stamped on the end here, and if it's there, if it was there, it's gone now, but I'm pretty sure this is from a Monte SS. I had a bunch of them over the years, and it's got the correct pitman arm already on it, so I'm pretty sure this is from one of those Super Sports. So we're going to put this in real easy. The only special tool here is got a pickle fork I'll use to split that apart. All right, I just pulled the cotter pin and loosened up the nut, and the center link is literally falling out of the pitman arm. This nut wasn't even really tight. I don't know if they thought you have to have slack in it like a wheel bearing, but that's not the case. So that was easy. Didn't even need a pickle fork or anything. So then we got 3 bolts in the side, 5/8 head. I think they stayed that way forever, even after the metric years. And the bottom one sometimes can be a pain because they get rusty. Now this one is tight. I didn't expect it to be rusty because I didn't think it was in there that long. All right, there we go. Nice and easy. This is why I say nothing is ever as easy as you think it will be. So I just figured out that this lower bolt here was never removed when they installed that manual steering box. And what happens is water gets in here and you get rust around that bolt. And luckily the frame's not rotted, but there is definitely some rust inside the tube that the bolt goes through. It's pretty common with these things. So what I'm going to do is keep working this bolt in and out of here and get the rust out of here, and probably be replacing this bolt with a spare, because what happens is the bottom bolt, see the rust coming out of there? The bottom bolt gets thin from the rust. There we go. It's out. So, not too bad, but you can see how the body of the bolt is starting to rust. Here's a good one. So, it's really not bad. I've seen much worse. I've seen these down to like paper thin, but I'm going to replace it anyway because I have a spare. And we'll put plenty of anti-seize on these guys, so won't have to worry about that ever again. All right, I got anti-seize on the bolts. Set the pitman arm over the center link there. And we'll get these started. Now, and I always use a hand tool to get them started before any impacts or any of that kind of stuff, so nothing gets cross-threaded. All right, that's good. Put the nut back on the center link. I don't know if the steering box is at the right angle. Let's see. All right, got a new cotter pin. Get that through there. If your cotter pin doesn't line up, just crank down the nut further. Don't back it off and loosen it up like a bearing. It's a suspension piece. All right, good to go. All right, power steering installed. Nothing special to that. Everything's all tight. Good to go. I think that Z, I marked that, might have been another identifier of a quick box. I can't remember if this number here meant anything. But, like I said, I'm pretty sure that's a power steering box off an SS Monte. I don't want to crank it lock to lock right now because it's going to spew fluid, so I have to put a pan under it. But first thing I want to do is figure out the steering. I want to keep the original steering column and wheel so it looks like a Rambler. Could always do a sport spoke. You know, it would be a cool steering wheel. What are they? Javelins? Was it Javelin SSTs, or was it the AMXs that had the 3-spoke like wood steering wheel? I think that would look really cool in this car, but I don't have one. And I've looked online and people have them, are pretty proud of them. So I don't know if I'll ever get one. But for now, we'll just stick with the Rambler wheel. But I got to put the column in and see what it's going to take to adapt to the steering box, which from everything I read is 3/4 inch 30 spline. All right, steering box is installed. Now it's time to make the connection. Steering column down to the box. Got some parts. Let's get into it. All right, got a few things here, some new, some not new, as usual. We've got a 3/4 inch 30 spline to 3/4 inch double D U-joint. That's going to go off the steering box up to the column. And then at the column, I've got a 3/4 D to 3/4 D U-joint. And I've got a locking collar and a little section of double D shaft that I cut off of something. So we'll go over everything and why we have to use it. So first thing with the steering column, obviously I cut this right off of the steering box on the original front end of the Rambler. And it's not long enough to get to the steering box. Otherwise, I could have just used a U-joint and then tied in, but that's not going to work. Plus, this is not exactly dead on with this. We could try to mess with it, but it's better to just leave it like it is because I like to keep things somewhat factory. So the steering column right now is bolted in as factory. But the thing is, when you cut a steering column like that, when it was tied directly to the box, you have this problem. And that is, there's nothing holding the steering column together. It used to be the steering box. So now, we've got to do something to keep this shaft from moving up and down inside the steering column. So normally when I do this, I just cut the shaft around here, change that or modify that to double D, and then put the U-joint right there, and then that is the stop to keep the shaft from moving. But because this is so close to the exhaust manifold, there's room, but I'd rather not have the joint right there next to the heat. So I'm going to leave this all factory, and I'm going to put the joint down there. But that doesn't help me with the column moving up and down. So that's where this guy comes in. This is just a 3/4 inch stop, if you want to call it that, with a set screw. And once I polish this up a little bit more, this will slide up, there it goes, right up over here, and we'll lock tight the screw, but I'm also going to drill a little dimple in there so it can't move, but that'll be the fix to keep that from moving in and out. So first thing we'll do is make sure the steering column is down all the way in the housing where it needs to be, and I'm going to tighten that up. So first thing I'm going to do, this is just like same thing I'm going to do, you'll see with the U-joints. I'm going to push this up tight, and then I'm going to tighten this Allen key. I'm sorry if I'm blocking it, but I got to make sure that is all the way up. And then I'm going to crank that down. And with that tight, I'm just going to turn the steering column, make sure everything's good, no binding, no up and down movement, and that's all good. Then, what we're going to do is take the stop off of here, and there's going to be a mark on there where the set screw was. And there's the mark. Now I'm going to take a punch and put a dimple in there so my drill will stay straight, and I'm going to drill a dimple right in that spot. All right, I'm going to do my best to get this where it needs to be. Perfect. Even though I dropped the punch. There we go. Good. Now, I'm just going to grab a drill bit. This is actually a little small, but I'm just going to get it started. All right, so I've got a pilot hole started. And when you do that, before you get too crazy, once you start drilling your hole, just take your stop with the set screw out and slide it over, and just make sure that your dimple is lining up with your threaded hole there. I'm happy with that. Then I have my locking set screw here, and I grabbed a drill bit that's about the same size. And I'm not going to drill a hole per se. I'm just going to use the tapered end of the drill to kind of get a recess in there. I'm not drilling too deep. I just want something that'll keep the Allen key from moving around, and the Allen locking screw there from moving around. Something like that is fine. And that will go in there good. Just gives it something to bite onto. You can see that right there. All right, now we're going to put it on. All right, got my set screw here. Put some Loctite on it. That in there. Crank that down. Okay. Good to go. So now, steering column is good. It's tight. Can't move. First part done. Let's get on to making the connection. So to make this all come together, now that this is all set, like I said, I got to go with this joint. This is a 3/4 double D to 3/4 double D. I'm going to mount that, I don't know, around here somewhere. And then the joint at the steering box is a 3/4 inch 30 spline to a 3/4 double D. Now, few things I'm doing here all at once to go through this and make this all work. So first thing I did, I jacked up the front of the car and I turned the steering full lock to find where center straight ahead should be. This is a very quick box. This thing is definitely out of an SS. It's only about 2 1/4 turns lock to lock. So it's very fast power steering. It's going to be a fun car to drive, but I have it set right now straight ahead, best I can do. Does it have to be exact? No, not in this situation, because we're using this 30 spline joint, and let me show you something about that. So obviously we're tying into the GM box, and you see how they have a flat area machined here. And they also have this groove machined in it. Now, you would think, okay, put the joint so that the set screw is lined up on the flat. Now, you can do that and then drill a dimple in the steering box. But the thing is, if you don't do this exact and your steering wheel is off a little bit and you want to take this off and rotate it to fix it, now you're not on that flat anymore. So better yet, this machined area here pretty much lines up with the set screw in the joint. So rather than put the set screw on the flat, I'm going to turn it completely opposite of it. So now when I do all this, if it isn't perfect, I can still just turn this joint and the set screw will go into that machined groove. And I don't have to worry about any drilling or putting a dimple in it or anything. And that should work fantastic. Now, the one modification I am going to make is this nipple here on the end of the steering box here. I'm going to cut that off because I want this joint to slide down as far as possible. And let me get this so you can see in there. And you can see the nipple inside there. If you put this all the way in, the U-joint hits it and it also limits your travel for the joint. So in a perfect world, yeah, you'd slide it out and then this can move completely, but that takes us away from where I want the joint. So I'm going to cut that off first, and then this will be able to go all the way down over the steering box, and our set screw will line up with that machined area in there. All right, now we'll not record cutting that little nipple off of there because the microphone just destroys the sound on any power tools really badly. Kind of makes it sound like sometimes nails on chalkboard. But one other thing I want to say before we start assembling this thing, because you're going to see it as I go, there's a whole bunch of things to keep into account here. Obviously, you want your steering wheel straight with your front wheels. You're going straight, you want the steering wheel straight. So that's what we're dealing with there. The next thing is you want these joints to be in phase when you assemble this. And what that means is you want the sections of this to line up. And I'll show an example of that, of in phase. So this is going to be the joint coming off of the steering column. Let me get these out of here so it's easier to see, because it's important. If you look on YouTube and find a video on drive shaft phasing, you'll get an idea of what happens if you're not in phase. So this is how this should be put together, except that I have a burr on my shaft and I can't get this together. Hold on a minute here. All right, let's try this again. See which way is in phase. That's in phase. Okay, so looking at this steering shaft, notice the orientation of the joint halves. This and this, they're in line. You do not want it. Now this joint, maybe you can't mess it up. Oh, that's pretty good. So the way I'm doing it right now, you can't mess this up the way they made these. But I have had them. If you're doing a 3/4 to a 3/4, yeah, that's in phase. And if I flip it the other way, that's in phase. So I guess you can't mess this one up because it only has one side 3/4 on this joint. But you don't want to put it together like this, where you have this joint in that direction, and then you have the other side not matching, if that makes any sense. You want these to line up. It keeps everything in phase when it's turning. It keeps things from going into a bind. Like I said, you look up drive shaft U-joint phasing and you'll figure that out real quick. Of course, the steering shaft, you're not going to feel it as much, but you can have binding. A drive shaft, yeah, you'll have big problems. So just keep that in mind. I'm assembling in that direction. And I guess I really can't mess it up on this setup. Another thing we're going to talk about is how far the shaft should go into the joint. Now you notice it can go all the way in. If you go in too far, you're going to bind the joint. You only want it in and maybe just a little bit proud. This joint has to be able to make full rotation. The other thing is, as I'm assembling this, and I'll go over it, I want this shaft to be installed so that if something did fail, say a set screw came out or something, this can't fall apart. You want to do it so that if it did loosen up, the shaft could fall, but cannot fall out. And then you would feel it in the steering wheel if you had some slop and you know something's wrong, but you're not going to die. So that's just another thing we're going to talk about as we assemble this. All right, so let's get started. So first thing, I cut the nipple off the end of the steering box there. And like I said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the set screw 180 out from the flat. That gives me the most amount of adjustment. If I do put this all together and the steering wheel's crooked, that means I can just take this off and rotate it a spline or so and put it back on, and everything will be straight and we'll be good to go. Right now with that nipple off of there, you have to take my word for it, but the set screw is lining up with that machined recess in there. So in the steering box, so that's perfect. So I'm just going to set this on here right now like that. Now, this joint, the 3/4 to 3/4, I think I'll put it up around here. I'll leave myself some slop just in case I make a mistake and I have to recut this and do it again. But yeah, I don't want it way down here. Obviously, I can't get a shaft in there, but I think right around there should be fine. So I'm going to cut this steering shaft off. I'll add like 3/4 of an inch for it to go into the joint, and I'm going to recut this shaft. All right, so steering shaft is cut down now. Obviously, this is a 3/4 double D. Not going to fit over 3/4 round, so I'm going to have to modify this caveman style with the cutoff wheel and change that to a double D so that this will get on there. And to do that, said like here's a piece of 3/4 shaft. That's what's on the steering column right now. And that's the double D, and all I have to do is set this shaft on this and mark it, and then just cut straight across the top and just kind of cut out flats for the joint to fit over it. All right, so to mark this shaft, all I'm going to do is I put this piece of 3/4 double D in the joint, and I'm just sliding it up until it hits the round shaft, and I'll try to get it centered best I can, and then we'll mark it. And then I have my spots where I can cut this, and I'll sneak up on it. I'm not going to just cut a whole chunk of it out at once. I'll take a little bit at a time until the joint fits over it tight, and it should work. In the middle of putting this joint on, you can see how the dimple you drill, you want it to line up with your set screw, so the set screw will actually thread into the shaft, and then it has something to bite into, and it can't move up and down even if it got a little loose. But we're Loctiting everything, and I don't see that going anywhere. All right, time to cut the double D shaft. Obviously, this will be our connector between the joints. Notice we are in phase. This joint here and this joint here. And I'm going to cut the shaft a little longer than each of these ends. Obviously, I want this shaft to slide in, but not too far. So I'll cut it to about that point on the joint on each end, maybe a little longer, just so it's easier to cut it down if I need to, and I'll make it too short. But we'll chop that down and get it in there. Steering shaft is cut. Now let me show you how I came up with the length here. I have the steering column marked where it's straight and the front end is straight right now. So I'm going to put this in. I'm push that all the way in, and I can just barely get the joint over the steering column, over the steering box. So now I've got no set screws in here. If this joint is bolted down or set screwed to the steering box, and this one's already done, the steering shaft, even with no set screws in it, can't come out. It's not going to be able to fall apart. Even if this here came off, it's not going to come out. It's still going to be hooked. So if something happened and something loosened up, you would get some slop in your steering, but you're not going to die. You're not going to lose your steering. That's very important. You don't want it to be able to fall apart. You have to be able to get in here and really, take it apart to get it to come apart. So now what I'll do is I'll set this steering double D shaft up centered so it's just barely sticking out of the inside on both joints. I'll Loctite the set screws to the joints, except for the very bottom one, because that's going to come apart later when we take this back apart. But these joints are going to stay, so I can put the set screws in there, Loctite them, and I'll show you the finished steel. Good to go. Steering shaft is all installed. It's all tight. Move the steering. There's no slop in it. It's all good. Nice. Super quick steering. That's going to work out good. One other thing to do, if you do something like this, where you take, say, an original steering column that was rigidly mounted to the steering box, you're going to have to change the mount for the column at the firewall. Because when this was originally just a big straight shaft and permanently mounted to the box, the steering column couldn't move. It just had a rubber gasket and a metal plate, but the metal plate was not welded or anything to the column. Now that you have this, can move, you want the base of the steering column to be pretty much rigidly mounted to the firewall. So when I put the reinforcing plate in for the clutch master, I'll also make a plate that will weld to the steering column and mount to that reinforcement area as well. So then the steering column can't move, and then you get no flex in the steering shaft. The thing I noticed now that the steering column was installed is the location of the shifter. It's forward of the steering column, so I think that's going to work all right. I mean, even maybe I need like a bench seat type shifter, but just general seating position, I think that's going to be just fine. I don't know what kind of a handle I'm going to need yet or anything, but I think that shifter will work where it's mounted, which means I can finish off the tunnel. All right, well, since the shifter looks like it's going to work where it is, may as well go ahead and finish this tunnel off and get some scrap metal and get this set up. Woo! Got undercoating burning off here. All right, I'm in the middle of this. I actually put back the piece that I cut out of the tunnel, and I'll raise it up on one side. I'm just going to weld it back in on one side and tie it into this little bump for the shifter. And I had to leave a hole big enough to remove the shifter if I ever wanted to change the shifter. So that has to be that way. And yeah, not the prettiest, but hopefully when it's all covered up with carpet, it'll look all right if I put carpet in this car. Almost done with the tunnel. I stopped recording because all I'm doing is throwing sparks at the camera, which is probably not the best thing to do. Kind of messes up the lenses, but you know how it goes. We do what we can do. So this side's all done. The back is done. The front is done. All I have left to do is one piece on the other side to splice in. And we got a tunnel. Let's get that done. We'll come back. Tunnel is done. As well as me. I'm tired. So yeah, I started getting tired there. Some of those welds are not the prettiest, but they'll work. Not a problem. Seam seal, bed liner, be good as new. Yeah, I'm glad that's done. Okay. As I said, that's done. And I'm done. All right, so yeah, I'm done. So I'm done for the day. So what we do? Got steering done and got the tunnel finished off. I'm to the point now where I got to make a list. I got to figure out, I got to kind of work backwards. the way I look at it is ultimate goal, obviously, we're going to be driving this car in the spring, like as soon as it's nice, like March or whatever. Even if it's nice in February, we'll take it out. I don't care. But the way I look at it is around March, the weather starts getting good. Car must be finished, I'd say, by then, or at least wrapping up. Time goes very fast. It really does. Weekends go fast. I'm going to set what I consider attainable goals. And if we do better, we do better. I'm going to say October 1st, I want to be painting this chassis and painting, or bedlining rather, the underside of the car. If I can get all that done around October 1st, the weather's still good, we get the car put back together and we start into assembly. Right now is all, you know, the fabrication work and getting things how it needs to be so we can blow it all apart. And then it's going to be like a snap together. Everything will just fall together just like it did now, right? At least it should. That's the plan. So working backwards, October 1st to be painting, hopefully earlier than that. But I have to make a list of things that I need to do before I can separate the body and the frame. There's a whole lot of just stupid little things that need to be done. And it's getting to the point now where I'm thinking, well, what do I got next? What's this? What that? I got to make a list. And then we'll go over the list on the next video and just keep pushing forward, try to get something done every week. And it is moving forward. So it's doing good so far. And so far, I think it's coming out pretty cool. I hope you like it. I like it. And when I drive it, I'm going to like it a whole lot more. So yeah. All right. Well, that's that. See you on the next one. Thank you very much for watching. Thanks for following along. Thank you very much for subscribing. I appreciate it. If you like low buck builds, it's all I do. So even if Rambler is not your thing, stick around because I have lots of weird stuff. And all the work that I do is applicable to no matter what you're building. So hopefully it's something you're interested in. All right, that's that. See you on the next one. Later.